Steve got it.
Steve got it? You should have got it.
Apparently,
Check it.
I'm
Not
checking.
connected? Good, how you doing?
Send something to it.
Sit down a little
Maybe
bit
it knows
so,
because I'm the sender.
in the room,
Okay.
take their mask off, so we're
These computers are pretty smart nowadays.
I hear that.
Some of the things.
Everyone's here now, right?
gonna like treating you.
Okay, we'll do next time. Nope.
Ready to shovel some more snow?
No, she said she doesn't feel well. It's probably stress related. That's better than COVID. But I said,
Last quarter.
with the world we live in,
Pretty much what I did.
I had to wait,
you can't assume.
you and I, I had to wait, because, my mom's street didn't get plowed, and it's up on a hill. So I was like, just call me when it gets done. And she called, and I'm like, I'll be right there, because I wasn't gonna get up or go any later than I had to.
I wish I missed the halftime show too.
Well, I started to get it.
God, dude.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the 5:45 p.m. Special meeting of the Berlin Board of Education budget presentation. We are going to start out this meeting with a budget presentation, which is the overview to the public. So I will kick us off. Okay, so as we begin, I just want to let you know I did check and I was instructed to take the mask off when I present, so we moved everyone down one, just so you can hear better. So I just want to first off thank Superintendent Benigni, Ashley Dorsey, Jeff Cugno, all the school administrators, principals, the Board of Education, everyone who had a part in preparing this, going through this, fine-tuning certain numbers, getting the presentation ready for today. I know Ashley was working hard all day long. Brian was taking some questions as we were just preparing to make this presentation as easy as possible to understand to the general public who does not spend time in this budget the way we do. So I'm hoping that it will be comprehensible. So without further ado, we are going to get started. Throughout the presentation, you will be able to send emails with questions, and at the end of the presentation, we'll do question and answers, and the email, I believe, is being shown on the screen. So is the email shown on the screen? Okay. All right, so we're going to get started. So every budget starts out with the superintendent's goals, and the superintendent thinks about where, Superintendent Benigni really thought about where he wants our district to go with the help of stakeholders throughout our community, the administrators and the Board of Education. And these goals are really important, and our goals have actually changed from previous years as I was going through. And the first goal is to continue to provide quality education to all students at the standard that Berlin parents expect, as well as the community. Maintain favorable class sizes and adequate course offerings, which we'll get into as we go through the budget and why this is so important. Provide all students with an education that prepares them for multiple options and opportunities upon graduation. Ensure that appropriate courses, structures, and staff are available for new graduation requirements, which the state puts forth that we have to abide to. Provide adequate safety measures, and some of the newer safety measures are in fact COVID-related. Equipment and systems that allow all students and staff a safe learning environment. And that's imperative right now, especially as we look towards the future of bringing everyone back. and expand the Berlin Transition Academy in partnership with Cromwell Public Schools. So the Board of Education has set some goals with presenting this budget. We want to be able to effectively communicate the level of funding necessary to continue to provide a quality education that the students, parents, and community expect. And we want to present this and effectively communicate in a way where everyone can understand it, and if not, we hope that you ask questions. We want to present a transparent budget that is easy to understand, where the figures are broken down. We also want to show that we are taking fiscal responsibility as a priority without sacrificing the students. So this is a stacked bar graph, and this stacked bar graph, the blue part, the majority of it, shows contractual obligations for our staff. That is 3.43% of our request. 1.13% of our request are additional requests. So really, we don't have a lot to ask for at this point. And let me just see one last thing. So our budget request is 4.56% overall, which may seem high initially, but as we go through it, you'll see the need and how imperative it is that our needs are met, especially as we continue to trench this uncharted territory. And our ask for the budget is $48,534,130. Okay, so these are the line items throughout the presentation. I'm going to go through each section, explain what our ask is, what the increase is, and why. So we're going to start out with the administrators. That's a $118,807 increase. This is a total increase of 4.34% if we go back to this right here. It's just a percent difference. So this is the administrators, the annual contract has a step increase with a 2.6% increase in salaries. And again, these are negotiated through collective bargaining, and we do our best as a Board of Education to make sure we are giving appropriate raises in line with the Hartford area. If we were to go to mediation or arbitration, we're going to be told if we're going to win or lose, and then if we are informed that we will not win that, then we're going to incur the cost between $50,000 to $100,000 through negotiations. So these were all negotiated. I've participated in 3 different bargaining group negotiations, so I'm very familiar with the process, and I know that we don't give first ask, and we are very intentional with the asks. And there's been times where I've sat at the table and it's been said, and this is for all bargaining groups, I actually haven't been on administrators, but there's been times where it said, you need to increase this because they're going to take it to mediation, you will not win. And that's what we employ our legal counsel to inform us of. And I also have been on a team where we did go to mediation, and we did what we thought was right and best, and it is an expensive process. So just so you understand that, what the step increase means is for administrators, there's only 5 steps. So those who move up a step get that 2.6%. Those who are on the 5th step do not get the full 2.6. The other increase to this line item, I'll move forward, sorry about that, is the separation of Director of Business Operations. It was 1 position, and we separated it into 2 positions. So now we have an Operations Director and a Finance Director. Previously, we had a business manager, and that salary was $128,000. The Board of Education was also paying the building superintendent's portion of the salary to the town, which was $25,000. So we were paying a total of $153,000. With both positions, we're paying $190,000. So it's only an increase of $37,000 to now have two people do two separate jobs and do them extremely well. The $37,000, if you divide it into the $48 million budget, it's only a 0.08% increase. So it is a very small increase to have significantly more output. As the board went through this process to separate the position, we did have support from the town, and that's how we negotiated the $25,000 of the building superintendent's salary that we are no longer paying. Also, with the major renovations with security, vestibules, ventilation systems at the elementary schools, various tasks for operations, some required by the state, some necessary for our town based on the buildings, the director of operations is essential. And as we move into tighter budgets and really focusing on fiscal responsibility, having a finance director is very important as well. And like I said, the administrative salaries were contractual obligations, and not every administrator advances a step, and no new positions were added. So now moving into certified staff. So again, with the contractual obligations, I gave you a little bit of my experience participating in contract negotiations. And based on the contractual obligations, we have a 3.12% increase. However, due to staff reduction, we have a 3.09% increase for this line item. We did fund in the budget an additional elementary school teacher for Willard, for kindergarten. And this is the most unpredictable grade, as well as next year it's going to be even more so unpredictable, because with COVID, we do not know who chose to keep their kindergartners in preschool an additional year. Kindergarten in Connecticut is interesting because you can start your child at 4, but you can also opt to hold them back and delay their start until they're 5, 6, or 7 years old. So we just do not have the necessary information. I personally know people who have chosen to keep their children in pre-K for an additional year because they wanted their children to have the traditional kindergarten experience and education. So that is our certified staff. I wanted to bring this chart to your attention about the 5-year comparison. So in 2016 to 2017, we had 279.39 employees, certified teachers, and certified staff. Now we are currently at 266.7. So we're only adding one position for next year. So currently we are at the 266.7. So as you can see in this chart, we have been adjusting our numbers year over year. 279, we dropped to 267, because these were difficult budget years as well. And we were trying to eliminate positions on low enrollment, attrition with retirements, and just general need. So we dropped down to 267, then we brought it even lower to 264, then 259.4. We brought it back up to 266.7 because where we were was very difficult, and now we're just adding that one additional position. It is really important, which I will get into at later points in the presentation when we talk about tuition for magnet schools, why we need to make sure we have adequate course offerings that allow students opportunities, why we have favorable class sizes, because we can pack our classes full, but then it's going to have a detrimental effect on the backside. So, new staff requests. So I have 3 slides here for new staff requests. So I'm going to just take you through the first 2 quickly and then spend time on the 3rd slide. So this chart right here, this slide, identifies the left side, which is, I'm so sorry, it's so hard to see. Requests, one second. My notes are really hard to see. Okay. Oh, okay, sorry. The school, so this is new, the next slide is what I was confusing it with. I apologize. Thanks, Ashley. So this is just new requests in general. On this slide, we have 21 and a half total new staff requests. And this is where all the administrators throughout the district came together and said, this is what we need. And then, right here, this slide is the left column. This is where I was confused. The left column are the requests that are not funded, that said we cannot fund. The middle column are the requests that will be funded through the choice grant that we receive. And the third column are the requests funded through our operational budget, which are in this budget. A little bit later in the presentation, I'll be kind of breaking it up again and revisiting this, but this next slide really identifies that we had 21 and a half total requests for new staff. 13.7 of the requests were not funded. They didn't even make round one of the budget. 7.8 are funded through the operational and open choice. 3 paraprofessionals are in the open choice budget. 4.8 positions are funded through the open choice grant. So the 3 paraprofessionals, which I will get to in the next slide, I will explain why and the need. But if you look at the 4.8 positions funded through the open choice grant, BHS and Willard, both interventionists, those positions now are so important, more so than ever before, because students have really had a major change in the learning that they have been so accustomed to their entire lives, and we are going to have to do a lot of work on the back end to get kids caught up. And the interventionists are important. The Berlin Transition Academy is expanding based on need, and we are going to need a coordinator. And at Hubbard, we do have the increase for the intervention teacher by 0.3. But the office paraprofessional, you might be wondering, well, at McGee, why is it a paraprofessional, not someone coming from the clerical bargaining unit? And McGee previously had 3 secretaries. We had to cut one to save money in a past year. And unfortunately, 2 are not, we need more than 2. McGee is very busy, extremely busy in the morning. It's not a job where you can just get a substitute to come in and be a warm body. So with this 10-month paraprofessional, it's actually cheaper for the Board of Education to bring in an office para rather than an office secretary. An office secretary is a full-year position. A para is a 10-month position. The Board of Education contributes more to benefits for the clerical bargaining unit than it does for the paraprofessional bargaining unit. So this is really a cost-saving measure to bring in the paraprofessional and fill a position that is very much needed. So non-certified staff, and this is where I'll also elaborate on the 3 paraprofessionals that was on the previous slide. So the annual contract increase is approximately 2.4%. And again, I already went over the collective bargaining and the process behind that. And if we go to mediation or arbitration, the cost of the Board of Education is going to incur. By incurring that, we're then taking away from the children. So, you know, we do our best to negotiate as responsible as possible, and we go in pretty serious, because I think I was on 3 of the 4 of these. And so that, you know, we try and avoid the mediation and arbitration. We take the route that we're advised by our legal counsel, but if we lose, we are losing significantly, which will then impact the children. And also, our employees do work incredibly hard, and they do deserve a raise. So the paras that were discussed in the previous slide that are being funded in the operational budget are 3 special education paraprofessionals for the Berlin Transition Academy. The Berlin Transition Academy is for special education students who qualify beyond high school. They can get their services up till, I believe, 22 years old, and we by law have to provide that service if they qualify for that service. There's no option, there's no opting around it. And having the Berlin Transition Academy in district actually saves a significant amount of money than sending them elsewhere to participate. And that's why, as a board, we, you know, a few few years ago, we made the move to really improve this transition academy so it's attractive to the families in Berlin. So these 3 paras are due to the expansion, and 3 paras are required based on the students' needs and accommodations. And again, this is by law. This is not just saying we want 3 paras. The last item is actually interesting, increasing funding for substitute teachers and 5 permanent building substitute teachers. So throughout the state of Connecticut, I've seen it on the news. I don't know if you guys have. I know the people in front of me are well aware of this issue. There's a substitute shortage throughout the state. The governor has actually lifted the bachelor degree requirement and is now allowing a high school diploma to allow you to become a substitute teacher. Schools, it does not matter what school you are, it doesn't matter what you're paying, schools cannot get substitutes in. This was a problem pre-COVID, but COVID made this problem significantly worse. So increasing funding for the substitutes and adding 5 additional building subs brings it to, from us, 1 building sub per building to 2 subs per building. And this is also important for the consistency for students. As we all know, our students need consistency. We need consistent people who are coming in, who know the safety protocols, routines, the policies and procedures. We need people who understand academic achievement and building relationships with students. If we fill this, like most districts do, in Berlin probably as well, people can sign up and you have random people who come in on a daily basis for a daily rate as long as they've passed the background check. There's no consistency, and this can help contribute to student academic achievement. So also when other teachers have to cover for other teachers, because we have a sub shortage, it leads to higher teacher turnout and lower staff morale. So Berlin has always had a sub shortage, and by increasing this line item and bringing in 5 permanent building substitutes, this is a way to potentially save money, because if we continue on this path, we're gonna have to outsource our services to a third party like Kelly Services and then pay more money for substitutes. And then also with COVID, I'm sure this problem is not going to be gone next year. With the cohorting and having children together and safer, having consistent people in the buildings rather than a high turnaround of people. So that is our increase for non-certified staff, which is $255,168. In employee benefits, I don't have a lot to say on this slide because it's coming in at $662,762, which is a 10.26% increase. This rate is set by the town. We have no control over this. So this includes all operational and educational systems, which increase annually. The annual increase is negotiated and it can be between 3 to 5%. We obviously negotiate for the lowest rate. Software and licensing for Zoom licenses. Otherwise, we will not be in compliance with the state, and it can be a major legal issue. But also, we want to do it because that's what's right and best for children. So some of the operational and educational systems that we utilize in Berlin are Power School, School Messenger, Schoology, Canyon Creek for parent-teacher conferences, IEP Direct, and Talent Ed. And these services are necessary because we're living in 2021 and we can no longer rely on files with paper anymore. IEP Direct is a system that securely stores all the special education records. Talent Ed is for teacher evaluation and professional development. And, again, the state requires a TVAL system. Power School and School Messenger and Schoology have been beyond helpful and have allowed us to make this move from being full in school last March to fully virtual, now to hybrid. We would not have been able to do it without it, but this line item is necessary for us to run our operation. So utilities, this is a 0% increase. There's no increase. We base this number off of our previous year's number. So last year to this year, we can't increase that number. That's to take from the 1.13, that very small amount that we are asking on top of contractual obligations, and that will have to be allocated towards utilities. So we did not want to drive the budget up further by guessing a number, predicting a number. It's unheard of for utilities to come in at 0%, but in an effort to present a transparent and fiscally responsible budget, we left this number at 0%, and we will just do the best we absolutely can with it. So transportation, this is coming in at $39,199. Our contract with New Britain Transportation is 3%. However, this line item is only increasing by 1.22%, which is where we get the $39,199. And we receive funding for our special education students if their special education, their education and transportation is above a specific threshold that the state sets. The state then reimburses the district through the excess cost grant. So through the excess cost grant, we have the ability to allocate the funds towards transportation to offset this line item by 1.78%. So we could have included it, but did not, because again, we are trying our best to cut in places we can, because we understand that, you know, this is a difficult budget year, and we want to be as transparent as possible. Repairs and maintenance, again, this is an item similar to utilities. We just don't know based on last year, because last year was not an accurate year, because the vehicles were not being used from March through June. So again, this is under budgeted, but you know, we're sharing this in the spirit of transparency and fiscal responsibility. So tuition, I said I would get to talking about the favorable class sizes and adequate staffing, because it goes right into the magnet school tuition. Berlin Public Schools needs to pay for students who choose to go to magnet schools. We have no say if children can or cannot go. That is solely up to them. If we are not offering those schools, whether they're private or public schools, they have an annual rate increase. So right now, the magnet school rate is 4%, and the public and private annual increase is 3%. That's about 3.5%. This is, again, is coming out of the 1.13% on top of that stacked bar that we talked about. So we also have an additional special education outplacement that's costing $80,000. The student is currently outplaced this year. We did not anticipate or budget for that, but we found the money for it. We have to fund this next year. This is not a question of should we or shouldn't we. It's we have to do what's right and best for students, but we're also bound by law to do so. So again, tuition is completely out of control, other than having a school district that has robust course offerings and opportunities so students want to be here and nowhere else. So I included this. This was not in any of the superintendent's previous presentations. We put this and now we're going to go through it, and we're going to have to take more time as a Board of Education to really digest this and comprehend it. but we do have money coming in through grants. So I'm going to shortly get into the breakdown of the money, but just so the board knows and the public knows, our next steps is the Board of Education members need to review the materials. Then it's going to go to the committee, the Finance and Operations Committee, to discuss the allocation of it, and I will get into what it can and cannot be used for. And then it's going to come to the Board of Education for discussion and potentially an agenda item. So this is down the road at this point. This is not reflected in the budget, and you'll see why shortly. So the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, the Connecticut State Department approved $144,775. $10,134 is being reimbursed to St. Paul's. So for the ESSER 2, the state has set forth priorities and parameters. Loss, learning acceleration and recovery, family and community connections, school safety and social emotional well-being of the whole student, remote learning staff development, and closing the digital divide. And in capital letters, and this is right from the state, this is not to be used within the So the next slide provides some more information about an additional relief fund, the one that's anticipated. We have not received it yet, and authorized have made that very clear. The board will need more time to really understand and digest this information and have more conversations, because if this is the first you're hearing about it, I recently heard about it. So it's new information. Then the Corona Relief Fund, there's more information on that, like all in the news. But this is the Connecticut State Department approved us for a specific amount, and again, this can be used for PPE like desk shields, K1 furniture, because kindergarten and first grade this here as I get into the next few parts of the presentation around supplies, textbook material, equipment, and all other expenditures, because these are going to be very similar to what was outlined here, but they can't be used for the same. So supplies, textbooks, and material, this number actually has not increased in the past 3 years. For AP UConn ECE Biology, we are required to update the text. We also need to update the text for algebra and geometry. So that's $26,211. If you're anything like me, I saw that number, and I said, wow, that's a lot of money for textbooks. Are we getting textbooks for every student? And then when you look into the cost of textbooks, they can be anywhere from $200 up. Some might be a little bit less, but typically $200 is the number to go with. And if you take that, the $26,211 and divide it by $200, you're only getting 131 textbooks. So for that number, it's not even like we're reaching every single kid in district. And with the textbooks, being used in a different way, potentially being out since March, courses changing, we need to update them. It is actually required. We can't say, oh, we're going to skip this AP UConn class. We will not be able to run it if we don't update the textbooks. And then the $2,094 is just for replacement of supplies, textbooks, and other materials. Again, we have been out since March. If we don't make these changes, we will not be competitive, and then we're going to lose our students to magnet schools or other schools. And, that's going to then affect what we pay, and we're going to be paying more for those students. So the next slide is equipment. All items under $25,000 have to be included in the operational budget, which was implemented by the town. So previously, items that were under 25 could be in the capital budget, and it did not increase the operating budget. So that's why in the budget summary, you see 47.26% increase and 72,876 as the figure, because this is a new number that is added. This number is actually significantly less than what we need. When we made this budget, it wasn't based on everything we need. Let's make a nice big wish list. This was, we really need to scale things back and ask for only the absolute essentials. So the majority of increase is going to be allocated for technology, which includes infrastructure, classroom, student, and school technology. So in the past, we have not had adequate funding for technology. We have used end-of-year funds. And I am so grateful we did, as a Board of Education, allowed Brian to go ahead and use that money, because if we didn't, we never would have survived the pandemic the way we have. We were ahead of most districts, and and it was very clear in the news, if you follow the news, and what other districts were going through. The state was buying devices and attempting to deploy them, and then kids didn't have them. But Berlin, we just picked up and went, and we did our absolute best. Those circumstances weren't perfect. And the other thing I want to share is, if you finish end of year and have 1 to 3% left over, you're usually doing pretty well. That's considered exceptional. If you are finishing your budget with a major surplus above 3%, that's when there's an issue. We are typically around 1% or lower. So, I just want to bring some attention to that. In the business world, if I was running, creating a $48 million budget and finishing with just 1% left, I would be highly recognized and probably given a raise and a promotion. But, I feel like the stance of the town is we get a lot of criticism for it. And I understand the criticism around finishing with a surplus when we are trying to be fiscally responsible. But at the same time, the money has been able to be utilized, which then it supported all the students in Berlin and had a major, major positive impact. So the end of year funding, what we don't spend, we always give back to the town. We are always transparent. We always talk about it, and we always try and send something back. And then all other expenditures. So this slide right here, in 2020 to 2021, we requested $62,186. So anything we did for COVID or anything we've had to do, it's not in the capital plan for the town. We have no extra money laying around to fix anything. So we have had to increase this number moving into the 2021-2022 budget to $122,289,000. So this number jumps off the charts when you look at it. When I looked at this number, I was like, this is an 80% increase, 80.57% increase, which is really high. And with that, the original requests were over $1 million. We reduced it to $50,103 for all of the schools and buildings within the district. Not every school gets that. $50,000 throughout the entire district. So if you take $50,000 and divide it into last year's number, which is a 62,186, you get 80.57, which is the 80% number. Original requests of the $1 million, they were reduced to the $50,000, and capital improvement, and what we have below was not accepted in. So the capital improvement reduced to $50,000, capital improvement not accepted in the capital plan. So we had $949,000 in unfilled requests at all schools, all levels. The next two slides, I'll give you a quick overview of what some of the requests were and how many there were. But for that $50,000, it's routine painting, district-wide restoration of recess area, window repairs. So this has just been an underfunded budget line item. And as you can see, some of these requests, our numbers do not, what we're asking for, do not reflect our need. Our need is much higher than what we're asking for. And again, if we hadn't used previous end-of-year funding, we would not be in the place to help all our students achieve in Berlin. And technology is vital. We need to replenish it, and all of our technology has been out since. With the devices that are necessary to learn the way students are learning. So back to the budget overview. So I broke the budget overview, the budget executive summary down so you can see the percent difference in increases, what the actual number was in 2019 to 2020, then what the number was in 2020, 2021, and what we are proposing for 2021, 2022, the dollar difference and the percent increase. So I hope I provided some clarity around what we're asking for and why we're asking for what we're asking for. So, you know, we have that stacked bar graph, which I'll get to at the end, where we have our contractual obligations. So contractual obligations are in there, and then that 1.13% is everything else in there. We're going to move on to the Hartford Open Enrollment Program. And the purpose of sharing this slide is not to put a dollar sign on students, but the purpose is to show our good faith in creating diversity in our schools for all our students, for our Berlin students, for our Hartford students, creating diverse atmospheres and learning environments, but also a good faith in creating a revenue stream to offset the costs of the district for the taxpayers. And we understand education is very expensive, and it's going to continue to be based on what we've been faced with the pandemic. But the next few slides is just going to break down where the money's going, how it's being allocated, how many choice students we have, and what we're adding. So as you can see, 2020 to 2021, we've accepted 16 new seats. We need to stay above the 4% to continue to receive the funding that we have. And based on everything that's happened in the past year, it's been abundantly clear that, you know, we need diverse opportunities for our students, and we want our students to learn in diverse environments so they can, you know, be global citizens. So we have 9 kindergarten seats, 4 first grade seats, 2 third grade, 1 8th grade. Those are siblings of students who are already in district. And I just want to go back to the new staff request of the 1 elementary school teacher at Willard. There's absolutely no correlation between that kindergarten teacher and the 9 kindergarten seats. The way we fill choice is by if 20 is the limit in a classroom and there's 17 students in one class and 19 students in another class, say Hubbard. I think 20 is probably way too much for kindergarten, but that would be for extra seats in that school. So you're gonna put a choice student in one of the classes to get you to the 20, and then put 3 students in another class to get you to that 20, because you can't take the 17 and the 19 and combine them and have upwards of 40 kindergartners in a class. It's most likely illegal and sounds like a terrible idea, but that's not what's right and best for children. So that's how we fill the open choice seats. So I just wanted to provide some clarity around that, because I don't want anyone in the community under the assumption that we're adding teachers to bring in choice students. We are filling empty seats where we can't combine 2 classes in a building. And every effort is being made to accept students at the kindergarten level rather than various grades, because we feel that students do a much better job when they start in kindergarten and stay with our school up through graduation. And we have to stay at least 4% of the choice enrollment so we can continue to receive the funding that is budgeted for. So the Hartford Open Choice budget, this right here outlines where the funds from the 2020-2021 choice grant are projected to be allocated. It's not set in stone yet because we're currently in that year. So it shows the salaries for the various schools, the money being spent on services, property, district-wide, some COVID expenses. And then we, all the way to the right, we have the 2021 to 2022 budget of where we are projecting the funds to go. Hartford Open Choice potential alternatives. So on this slide, you see 4 options of how we could potentially spend the money. On the previous slide, I showed you option 1. It is really important that the money is not already allocated for next year. It was just an example. We showed you this year's projection with a possibility for next year. We have no contingencies for COVID, so we don't know what's gonna come. We don't know what's gonna change, what's gonna happen, what the state is gonna require and expect us to pay. We don't know how things are going to change. I wish we did, because that would be much better for the students, but unfortunately we don't. So, you know, in regards to COVID, we also don't know what's gonna happen with outplacements. We might see an increase in special education outplacements after the year we've had. Again, we have no say and no control over that. Or even if we want to update technology. So there's no contingency in this budget to make any possible changes if we are faced with potential changes that we need. So last year we had funds available. We don't currently have the magnitude of funds this year. So we have spent everything that has come in. We are running a very tight budget, and we need to also make sure we're continuing to have a competitive course offerings, excellent teachers, and meet the needs of all of our learners, every learner in the district. And again, with the outplacements, if we get them, we have to fund them. We don't want to be in a place where we have to start laying teachers and employees off because now we have an $80,000 outplacement and we can't afford someone's salary. We don't want to be that district. We don't want to have that reputation of that district, and it's not right to the staff who work so incredibly hard for all of the students every single day. Our budget funding history, so we have had 2 excellent years and we're very grateful for that. We're very fortunate we had the funding, we received the funding that we did the last 2 years. So we're still catching up though from those years where we had very low operational budgets. So if we cut consistently, then when we start getting increases, we're playing catch up. I understand that, you know, you can't use the same excuse over and over that we're playing catch up, but again, we're in uncharted territories. We are living in a time no one ever predicted or knows how to walk through. What we are doing in this budget is being transparent, fiscally responsible, while trying to provide the best possible education that we can and create a town that people want to move to, raise their children in, and stay in. This slide right here is Berlin's adopted budget in the past 2 years. So you can see surrounding towns, Rocky Hill, Farmington, Cromwell, Berlin, Glastonbury, Wethersfield, and Newington. You can see where we rank. I love seeing this slide because, again, it makes me very fortunate that we received the increases we did the last 2 years, and I don't want that to go unnoted. When I started on the board, or my second year on, we were at the bottom of this chart. We were the lowest funded, and now we're right in the middle. So we have been making really excellent progress, and I just want the community to be aware that the board is grateful for this, and this is absolutely the right direction we want to continue heading in. This right here is our per pupil expenditure for Berlin and the state of Connecticut. Berlin is in red and the state of Connecticut is in blue. So as you can see, there were a few years where we were starting to trend pretty far apart, and now we're getting closer. We want to continue with that trend because that is really important, again, that we are funding adequately to support our students. And of course, no one wants their taxes to go up. I certainly don't want my taxes to go up, but I also want to make sure that I'm raising my child in a town where I know he's going to get a quality education and not send him to a private school because I don't have faith in the school system. This right here is actually really important. I want you to take a moment and think about this. The towns around us, the same towns we just shared, a percentage of their budget goes to education, and then the percentage goes to town. So all the way on the right-hand side, it's not in any numerical order from largest to smallest, it's in the same order as the previous slide. You can see in Rocky Hill, 54.45% of their budget is allocated towards the Board of Ed budget. In Farmington, 62.56% is allocated towards education. Cromwell, 60%. Berlin, 50.74%. Glastonbury, 65.57%. Wethersfield, 52.33%. And Newington, 61.06%. We are the lowest, so the smallest, we have the smallest percentage of our whole budget, which is on this slide, going into education. So this pie chart right here shows the Board of Education in red, the town in blue. This is based off the current year we're in. Board of Education received $46 million. The town received $45 million. So it's pretty much a 50-50 split, give or take. I'm going to go to the next slide of the Board of Education operational funding sources so we can talk a little bit about the breakdown of this. So as a taxpayer, I hear the $46 million budget for the Board of Education and think, wow, that's a lot of money for education, and next year that we're proposing is $48 million. I want to highlight, from the taxpayer's perspective, $46 million is a lot. However, $6 million of that, well, approximately, I'm rounding up because the number is 5,870, which is 12.65%, is coming from the state, and it's going to the town to offset our budget. So it's really approximately $40 million, not the $46 million. So I just want to highlight that because I think that can be a misconception, and through this presentation, I really want to provide clarity and have people understand where the money is, how it's broken down, and just make the process a little more clear. So back to the stacked bar graph that we started with, we have the 3.43% for contractual obligations, and again, I think I've exhausted the point of collective bargaining and the process that we go through. And then the top part, anything that's not blue, the red, all the way to the top, is just 1.13. So we broke it down. I broke down what we could have asked for, what we didn't ask for, all the requests that were not funded, the requests that were funded. So in order to achieve the goals that we started with, The superintendent and the Board of Education, it's imperative that we fund our schools adequately. The Board of Education fully stands behind this. Well, I hope so. We're going to vote shortly. But in our discussions, we do support this budget because we know that there's not a lot in here. There's no extra money hidden in here. And we want to make sure our schools are funded adequately. Not overfunded, just adequately. So we're not asking for an absurd amount. However, we are advocating for our children with this 4.56%. As a Board of Education, it is our duty to preserve our educational system. That is very important. The 4.56% is based around programs and people. We don't have a lot of places to cut from. And as many of you know, when we start cutting programs and people, that's when we have community outrage, people at our meetings, which is great. We love having people at our meetings, but people get very upset, rightfully so, because people's livelihoods are connected to it. Students are very invested and engaged in their learning, and they're receiving services that are crucial to their success. Everyone has had a challenging year. Last year's seniors basically lost all the things that seniors look forward to senior year. They lost their prom, their traditional graduation. Well, they had some type of prom, right? No? They had nothing. Okay. They lost their prom, their all-night graduation party, their traditional graduation, even though graduation was incredible, but it wasn't what the norm that they were expecting. They were really upset about it. Kindergartners didn't get to have that same kindergarten experience probably everyone in this room had, that really exciting, I'm starting school celebratory event with your families that you can remember for the rest of your lives. Schools and classes got quarantined when necessary, and people had to stay home, and parents had to find last-minute accommodations. Sports seasons were cut short or canceled. Students who were getting recruited for colleges lost a recruitment season. SATs did not happen, so the students who were academically motivated, really, really invested in scoring well on those SATs, they didn't have that opportunity. Field trips were canceled, competitions were at a full halt, and for most still are. Students are really struggling with this new normal. If we all think we're struggling, the students really are, whether they're showing it or not outwardly. We need to make sure we're still following COVID protocols, but doing what's right and best for our children. We cannot take more away from them at this point. It just doesn't make sense. It's not the year to do it. So what we've done during COVID is better than most districts around. We've had the synchronous learning, elementary schools every day. Students are in school or receiving instruction 5 days a week. A lot of surrounding districts have students in 4 days a week. Either Wednesdays or Fridays are fully remote days, causing more frustration for parents. We want to maintain a district that is able to be competitive, bounce back from COVID. We don't want COVID, to have its effects and then us not have the ability to bounce back. We want our town and our housing market to be an attractive place for people to want to move to. With a compromised school system, we won't have any of that. So if we cut further, we won't be able to provide our students with what they need. We don't know what all their needs are yet. We're not going to know until next year when everyone is back, and then we're going to start really seeing the effects of what happened this past year. This is the wrong time to take from the students and families who have encountered lots of tragedy, significant hardships, more inconsistency than you could have ever imagined. And we don't, like I said, we don't know the effects. So we need to be able to support our students, and we can't do that if we cut from that 1.13. So that is, I know it's more than 1.13, but on top of contractual obligations, it's really 1.13. So I'm going to stop there. I know we don't have a ton of time for questions, but I really wanted to break it down, and we started a little bit late, so I'm going to open it up and turn it over to Superintendent Benigni.
Thank you, Julia. At this time, I'm not seeing any questions that were sent in from the public. I know that the system's been glitching a little bit and fading in and out. I know that Mr. Smith's been working on that in the back, but I'm hoping that if there's any questions, you could send them to the email that's hopefully up behind me. It's on the site, so hopefully you can send that to the email. which is BOE@berlinschools.org. We'll take any questions at this time. Sure. Mr. Bordenero, we want to come to the microphone?
With all this seating, get to sit next to somebody?
Mr. Bordenero, if you could just state your name and address and the position. And actually, Mr. Bordenero is here because he is a liaison to the Board of Education as well as member of the Board of Finance for the town of Berlin. So not that we're having anyone here in the audience, but that's why he's within the audience live tonight.
It's Sal Bordenero, 81 Giano Lane, Berlin, Connecticut. I just got a couple questions. One is your submittal, your letter, actually said that your budget was developed based on no COVID conditions, that you would have no COVID conditions. But throughout this discussion, all I hear about is that there's impacts associated with COVID. So does a baseline budget consider COVID, expenses, or doesn't it? Putting aside the grant situation.
We in this budget here, we've not provided for any PPE, any additional devices that needed for COVID, other than the Zoom system. That's the only thing that's in here, because we believe there'll be a need for that next year. But everything, the monies that were spent this year are not in there. The additional teachers that were hired this year are not in there. All those pieces are not in there. If we are in the same situation we're on this year, this budget will need to be reworked, and there'll be additional things. So it wasn't taken into account to say the monies that we spent this year are embedded in the budget. They're not in staffing, not in PPE, not in any of those measures.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that is because even in your detailed presentation, you talk about remote, teaching and all that. So I would think that's a COVID-related situation, but yet in your detailed presentation, you talk about COVID, you talk about remote positions. So that's why I was just asking that question.
There's no budgeted positions that will be remote in our budget here.
Okay.
Nope, there's no teaching positions that are remote.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think as I was referencing, just talking about certain things that we have encountered with COVID and the importance of making sure we continue to be funded. So, because of COVID, talking about cutting programs and people, that's going to then have an effect on students, especially the aftermath of COVID.
I have one more question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
So your student projection for population for next year said it's going to drop 124 students. So that's about a 5% drop. Is there anything been adjusted to accommodate that drop, or?
I think when you look at the Prada report, that's a projection of where we could be, and how accurate that may be, we're not sure. But definitely, as far as looking to where we drop, there's no new positions other than holding one position, which we typically do at the elementary, not knowing what the K level will be because of the variability of parents withholding. We just don't know. So the only new positions you're seeing in this budget would be the 3 paraprofessionals.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Have any questions come through the email?
Want to check again? Let me check one more time. Yes, everyone should have it. No, I don't see any emails this time.
All right, so I just wanted to give it another minute just in case questions were coming through. Well, thank you for allowing me to present. I know it went a little longer than anticipated due to us starting late and just me going into further detail, but thank you for taking the time, and hopefully, since this was live streamed and recorded, if people didn't have the opportunity to hear it, they can go back, reference it, and reach out if they do have questions. So thank you so much.
Could I just add just a little here, just a little bit about timeline. So tonight will be the board meeting and discussion on the budget. The board will then act by February 23rd to submit the budget to the town. And then on March 3rd, the Board of Education and the Board of Finance meet to discuss the budget. And from the Board of Finance, the budget will then move to the town council. So just a little bit of a timetable. And then the budget forum would be on March 30th. It's at the Senior Center at 1:30, and then it's at the annual town budget hearings at 7 PM in the Berlin High School Auditorium, but I would anticipate that would be similar to tonight, virtual presentation.
Thank you, everyone. So I will head back to the table and we will move on. We have one item on the agenda. Does anyone like to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Adam made the motion. Do we have a second? Carrie Sasu, second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, the vote is 8-0. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for a great meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Berlin Board of Education meeting. We are going to start our meeting out with a call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to start our meeting out with committee reports and correspondence to the board. So we will kick it off with our student representatives, if you want to start.
So first off, winter sports are able to continue playing and practicing. So all winter sports began starting to practice on January 19th, and then basketball games, ice hockey, and men's swimming meets were allowed to begin today, February 8th. There's actually a men's basketball game happening right now in the gym. Capstone this year was successfully completed on January 20th for students who took it during semester 1. It was both in person and virtually, and overall there were excellent products and presentations by all students. And the WERB radio on channel 94.5, that website has been updated. There are 6 new podcasts that are posted and some new regular radio shows like Lunchtime with Mr. Rudy, Mr. Sorois, and Mr. Boyle, where they review different lunch places in town. And there's also music reviews with different playlists. So I definitely encourage people to check out their Twitter account for more information.
Recently, students organized a drive to collect clothing and other necessities for Connecticut residents. And Berlin has 45 clubs that we have, and only 5 have been unable to meet this year, so there's been plenty of opportunities for student involvement. Many activities are actually virtual, so students can always participate. Tonight there was an upbeat virtual meeting. And lastly, the Unity Club is doing a number of things to celebrate Black History Month this February, including weekly announcements, student questionnaires, and school-wide advisory lessons to discuss and reflect on Black history.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Lindsay, for your reports. Do we have any committee reports? I know the Community Engagement Committee just met.
Yeah, we just met right beforehand to come up with some new ideas for the Citizen article coming out and brainstorm any other additional ideas. We do have some stuff that we're going to look into, possibly putting something on a website, and then maybe a video entertaining children or having children into it, but we're just working out the details on that right now.
Great, thank you. Have any other committees met? Yes, Tim.
Finance and Operations Committee hasn't met, but as you mentioned in the presentation to the town, we have the ESSER grant data to review and discuss, so that's something the F&O Committee will take up in the next week to go through.
Thank you, Tim. I look forward to that. Carrie, did you? Okay. Do you have a CREC report, Tracy?
No, nothing to report at this time.
Okay, correspondence to the board.
Yes, we have one correspondence to the board. Dear Brian, Linda, Michelle, Berlin School Community, thank you very much for the beautiful flower arrangement for the passing of my mother. The thoughtful gesture truly made this difficult time a little easier. Thank you. Jody Borden, special ed teacher at Griswold.
Okay. Is that it for, right? Moving on to audience of citizens. So I would like to share that I have received some emails from parents in town over the past few days, and I will share, rather than sharing all of them, I checked in with each and asking, would you like me to read your letter or just summarize, since I've received several. So I've received emails from parents, actually 3, who are interested in finding out more if the Board of Education will be sending out a questionnaire asking if kids and parents, if they want to attend school full-time. And some parents talked about how, you know, though the district is doing everything they can, their child may not be as successful as they like reaching their potential. And, you know, another parent said, I know that the hybrid system is working great, and there's some students who actually prefer the full remote, but it's not working for all. So what are the next steps? So at this point, I did touch base with Superintendent Benigni and figure out, so we will not be sending out a survey at this point because it's not, we know parents and children want to be back in school. We understand that if we can be back, we will in fact be back. And, you know, this situation isn't necessarily ideal for most learners, but we are doing the best we can. So after speaking with Brian today, he provided me with the most current update, which I'll share on record. So if parents have more questions or concerns, they will have a little bit more information. The Department of Public Health Central Connecticut Health District is recommending that we continue with the hybrid model for now. Then where the numbers currently are, in the new strain that they're saying is more contagious than the previous, and the teacher vaccination group has been pushed back. We want to make sure that our schools are safe for our students and all of our staff. Cromwell recently went back full in person, actually a week and a half ago, and now they're shut down for 2 weeks. We don't want to, we want to avoid that at all costs because, you know, right now families have their situations worked out. If we go back and then abruptly close, that's going to have a significant impact on the families with childcare. So Superintendent Benigni is going to continue to watch the numbers, and when they are consistently at a lower rate and the Central Connecticut Health District makes a recommendation, we will move forward with next steps. So until then, the district is accommodating students on a case-by-case basis. So if you feel like your child is really not reaching their full potential and having significant issues or whatever your circumstances may be, we recommend reaching out to one of your school administrators or the building principal and follow up. So on a case-by-case basis, accommodations are being made. I can't speak to what those are for all individual students, but we are trying to do our best to help all the learners in town. And you can always follow up with myself or Superintendent Benigni if you have any additional questions or concerns. So that is the response to the answer, the question. And that is all I got for audience of citizens. Anyone in the audience like to address the board? Okay. So we are, before we move on to the consent agenda, I would like to add an item to new business under new business, and it is going to be item E, the discussion of athletics, spectator, or winter sporting events. So that needs to be added to the agenda. That doesn't need to be a vote though, right? No, okay. Yes?
I'll make the motion that we add that to the agenda.
I'll second.
So a motion by Adam, a second by Tim. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, 8-0, so that will be added to new business, item E, discussion about athletics for spectator at winter sporting events. So moving on to the consent agenda. In your board packets, you have a consent agenda. I hope everyone reviewed it. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So the motion was made by Stephen. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mark. Is there any discussion around the consent agenda? Anyone have anything they would like to share? Right, so we will vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 8-0. Moving on to new business. So item A is a facilities-related update. Mr. Cugno, do you have an update for us?
Good evening, folks. Jeff Cugno, Director of Operations. I have a few things to update you on, which I believe are pretty important, what's going on with facilities. A couple of quick things. You remember at your last meeting that you spoke about a project and authorized the superintendent to go forward with planning a project for the YMCA daycare into Berlin High School. We have been planning that, working with the facilities department and a few other departments in town to put the plans, budgets, and so on and so forth in that project. We're moving forward. The same thing with the Berlin Transition Academy project. That's part and parcel of the same deal. We're trying to have that put into Main Street, although that project the BTA would not actually go into full-time the entire facility until July 1. But we're working very closely with the YMCA and Berlin High School and the facilities department, and the superintendent has been very involved in that. That's number one. I will say that there's leases already put out for review that will decide what the legal ramifications of those two leases are, and I think we're doing well with that at this point. We should have more to report in the next month. Secondly, the air quality study that we've been talking about for the last few months, that has just been completed. Just the other day, I saw a first copy of it. It has a huge amount of information in it. Not surprising. It talks about all 5 of our facilities. It talks about all 5 of our facilities and what could be done, what the present condition is of the air quality and the air quality systems that are on our 5 facilities, and also what could be done, and also what are some deficiencies. What we're doing at this point in time is there is a meeting planned for later this week with representatives of the town manager's office, certainly the Board of Ed, and certainly the facilities department, and probably a few other people to go over what that report's about so we can figure out what the next steps will be. There's a number of decisions that have to be made, what can be done, what should be done, how quickly we can do things, and what the budget will be on those. So I hope to be reporting to you over the next month, and most probably there may be people involved in committees going forward. So I'm glad to say that report is completed. It's going to be a pretty big effort, but a very, very important effort, and one that won't be resolved in the next, month or so. It's one that's going to take some money and some good planning in the facilities and some priorities that have to be set. We know, because it's been reported before, that the town is already considering doing new HVAC systems in the 3 elementary schools, although that's a plan that was done through capital or would be done through capital bonding over the next number of years. These things, this report included that, but it also includes some things that take care of some immediate deficiencies and things that may help the air quality in the interim. So that'll be a big project for us and a big project for the town. Next, an important one that we've heard about for a number of months, the ductwork at BHS. There's, of course, been a lot of discussion on what was going to be done with that, if anything. That report has been completed. It's been reviewed by the committee. I know Mr. Salina has been on that committee and has been very involved, as people from the Public Building Committee have been involved. Right now, from what I understand, as of this week or last week, the council approved one of the 3 alternatives that were put in place for taking care of that ductwork. They have authorized the planning and design of well, I guess the best way to put it is a preferred design, but it has to do with insulation and jacketing of the ductwork. That cost of that, of course, this is a preliminary estimate, is a little over $300,000. That money would come out of the excess money from the Berlin High School project, which is what we all anticipated. So it's all going in the right direction. I understand that as of today, in talking to Doug, that we're hoping to have the contract for the design. The council approved the contract for the same consultant that did the study, which makes a lot of sense. I didn't get a hard number on when that design will be done, but I'm assuming it will be done in a month or so. They'd be willing to go forward, and hopefully we're looking for the work to be done this summer. So that's a good thing for us. Now, from the board standpoint, the reason we wanted that done is, and the reason it's very important to the Board of Ed, other than it's our school, is that in order for the Board of Ed to accept the high school, which is a part of a legal method of us to accept the high school relative to the state contract that was put in place to fund building the high school. It's never completed or closed out until the Board of Ed accepts. And if those of you that have been on the board for a while understand that, we wanted to make sure that that piece of the project, which has been problematic, was taken care of. So I'm pleased to say that, from the town standpoint, from the board standpoint, the support we had to do that, when it looks like it's going our way, we'll have the ductwork in good shape. I'm anticipating that, at least the way I see it working, is that it would be time for you to accept the project when, in fact, there's a PO issued to do the work. This way, you don't have to think about whether it's going to be funded, when it could be funded, what the project is. There's a PO issued, that means it's going forward. You're going to see a schedule, and at that point in time, I would hope there'd be a resolution in front of the board to accept the entire project. The reason that's important is there are other funds that are available that were left over in the project, which the town would certainly like to look at and see what they could use it for. So that's that one, and just wanted to let you know that the two projects that you put in the 2% fund, remember in our last budget, we put $375,000 in the 2% fund. That was the Hubbard project for fire protection and McGee rooftop units. Those projects have been pushed forward by the town council and are now with the contracts for design and put in place. And we're expecting that work to be done, already designed and work to be done and put out to bid in the summer. So your money's going to good use and it's getting done very, very quickly. So I'm pleased to report that. And let's see. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Mr. Cogno, for your report. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Benigni to report on the current number of open choice program students in our school and present a recommendation to the board regarding the level of participation for 2021-2022 school year.
Currently, we have 121 students enrolled in the open choice program. With the bump up for next year after the students graduate, and this doesn't anticipate students that would opt not to re-enroll. We typically don't have a number of students that do this, but if they do move out of Hartford, they no longer qualify for choice. So we're supposed to have 112 students next year. Now, the numbers that you see in the budget, this changes constantly, so we're asking for 10 new students with 112 students remaining. We'd be at 122 students total. We're asking for those 10 students to be K students. If we could not get K, we'd look to grade 1. And as you said in your presentation, Julia, we would not be asking for another classroom. We have the ability to select what schools we'd want those students at. So we would balance them in the classrooms where it would not mean another teacher, it would just mean another student. So if we looked at the number of K classrooms across the district and we put one student in each classroom, it doesn't necessarily mean another teacher. So the number would be 122. We're asking for 10 students either at the first grade or K level, depending on which students. We obviously would put the K out first, and if we got all 10 in K, then we would have them all in K. If not, we would take them at the first grade level. The other thing that could bump this up that I ask you to approve, if they do have siblings that are in other grade levels, oftentimes we do accept those. So it could raise the number a little.
Thank you for your report. So we are going to move into the motion, then we'll have the discussion. So is there anyone that would like to make a motion for consideration?
I will move to approve the superintendent's recommendation regarding the level of participation in the open choice program for the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Motion was made by Carrie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Steve. All right, we'll open it up for discussion. Does anyone have any questions or comments they would like to share or ask Superintendent Benigni?
Julia, just, Brian, a couple questions. So with regard to the bump up, traditionally, how many, do you have a numbers for us, how many people we actually lose, like if they move maybe out of Hartford? Are we pretty confident with these numbers, or do we traditionally lose a couple kids here and there?
We traditionally lose a couple of kids here and there, and oftentimes that number fluctuates back up because there'll be a sibling. Like this past year, we had a few siblings that we took in. because we had their brother or sister was already in the district, or they were a K student, we allowed them to come into an off grade level, like seventh grade or, grade level. The thing is, we're not that close to 4%. I always back it up and say, what if we had 6 or 8 students, would we go below the 4%? Obviously, there is money tied to that, as far as keeping at the 4% threshold.
So I know that when we first began this program many years ago, there were students that were coming in at all different grade levels. I think it's smart now, incorporating and opening those seats early on in kindergarten so they can have a smooth transition going through their career in Berlin. So it looks good. Thank you.
It's definitely made a difference in having the students. We recognize that having them for 13 years in the Berlin Public Schools is better than sometimes students coming in 10th grade and only being here for 2 or 3 years. Just the transition is more difficult.
Thank you, Adam. Anyone else have any questions for Brian? Do we have a motion?
We did the motion.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's been a long day. Okay, we just had the discussion. Moving on. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 8-0. Thank you for that. All right, moving on to item C, review and possible adoption of the proposed Board of Education budget for the 2021-2022 school year. I'm sure after tonight, the board has heard their fair share of this version of the budget, but we have reviewed and discussed the superintendent's proposed budget for 2021-2022. We met January 1st to review it in detail, including information presented by the administrators. Thank you, everyone, again, who worked tirelessly to prepare your individual budgets and present them, your requests. And, again, Ashley, thank you for all your behind-the-scenes work and your prompt responses to emails. Then earlier this evening, we had our meeting to the public, which I believe you can view on the YouTube channel if you did not get to see it, for the community members to provide input on the budget prior to our approval. So the Board of Education and the Board of Finance, we will hold a joint meeting on March 3rd to then discuss the adopted budget. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt the Board of Education operating budget for the 2021-2022 in the amount of $48,534,130.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mark. Now we'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion?
I'd just like to just make a comment on the budget and how difficult it was for the superintendent to put together a palatable budget, given the times that we're living in with folks and COVID and jobs and taxes and everything else that's challenging for us. I do want to state, though, that we've left a lot on the table undone, and whether it's the facilities that need upgrades, enhancements for certain students, the balancing act that we're trying to accomplish with providing every student the quality education that they should receive here in Berlin, but also being fiscally responsible. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up to the superintendent that we do have a lot of work left to do with bringing facilities and the education to the level that we need to bring it. And I think this budget is a compromise, and it's fair, but I do think that we do need to continue to press to do better.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just wanted to say that, sitting here for watching budget presentations for a few years, I thought this year, Julia and Brian, everybody did a phenomenal job. And the way that it was broken down, I highly encourage everyone, if they did not happen to see it, that's out there, to watch the video. It was extremely simple and easy to understand, and it shows that there was so much time and so much thought into it. And there was a lot that was cut before it was even presented to anyone. So thank you so much for all the work, and you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Tracy. Just so you know, everyone knows the presentation that I shared today will be posted up on the website, the PDF version, and if anyone has any questions, certainly reach out. Any other discussion?
Julia?
Yep.
Okay. Similar to what Steve just mentioned, I know that we're talking a lot about the operating budget, but there is a lot that still needs to be done. I'm reminded of the science rooms at McGee that are the same way that when I went to school there, and that's many years ago, and they need some work. I'm thinking about making sure the bathrooms are up to speed at the elementary schools. The air quality is going to be another big issue. I would assume mostly at the elementary schools, but all schools are going to have some adjustments that need to be made. And then obviously technology. So, a lot of the capital for the actual infrastructure of our buildings, but also the capital for equipment and technology are going to be very important. And they seem to be the easy ones to be cut off because they're large numbers all at once, 100,000 here, 50,000 there. But it doesn't mean that they are not important. And quite frankly, the further we push them down the road, the more expensive they get. So I just want, to Steve's point as well, to keep that in mind, that these are not issues that are going away, but things that need to be addressed. But I want to, again, also thank the superintendent and all the staff for all of your work and efforts on this budget. I think it's certainly fitting and meaningful given this current time, so thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. One thing that I wanted to, I think, point out to everybody regarding this, we talk a lot about that stacked bar graph, which I think is very informative, and the fact that the 1.13% is really what's above and beyond contractual obligations. Looking at it a little bit closer, I would argue that the 0.25% of tuition, the 0.06 of supplies, materials, and textbooks, which was basically textbooks for AP UConn classes that we have to buy new when UConn tells us we have to buy them, and the 0.09% for transportation. Utilities was a zero, as we talked about, but the transportation costs are costs that we have to incur to transport kids from their house to school and back. So we really don't have much of a say there either. That really drops that flex room down to 0.73% rather than 1.13% of a couple of staff members and some equipment and the contracted services, which, as an IT guy, I would argue that the systems that we have to run our district costing more, it's as much an essential service and a contractual obligation as anything else, because without those systems, we go back to, paper attendance and paper lesson plans, and I'm looking at the daggers coming from all the administrators in the room as I suggest that, knowing that it's not going to happen, but they still want to take me out for even suggesting it. So there's even less room in this budget in terms of things that are not going to get into people and functionality of this district if we can't get these levels that we're asking for. So, thanks.
Yeah, I will say, as I was going through, Brian's and figuring out what I wanted to present, I asked a lot of questions. I took a lot of time and really trying to break it down so this is transparent and understandable, and you guys can pick it up and read it and comprehend what it means and where the money's going. So I know my presentation took longer than I would have liked it to. I really wanted to be clear and see that, not a lot is in it. And, we're really just doing the best with what we have and only adding where we need to, so. Any other discussion before we? So thank you, everyone, for participating in this evening, being here. And we are going to move it to, do you have anything you would like to say before we move on to a vote?
I just think the anomaly of last year and not having actuals that were an actual school year cannot be as predictive as they were in the past. So some of the hunches that we're taking with utilities, with transportation and things are just that. And we're playing with, that 1 point whatever % within those hunches. So, given that we could still be dealing with COVID at some level, and we don't have the funds in there to have remote teachers and things as we've had this year, there's not a lot of variability. And I think the piece that in the first presentation is the choice funds that have not been allocated, and we listed 4 options. You know, having a $250,000 for potential options of, if needed, is not a lot of money if those options, you know, if we have to go that route. And I think that's could be one of the very much a shortcoming of the budget with the uncertainty that lies ahead. We don't have the ability that we had last year with the choice account, where we were able to maneuver the funds to make some things happen. So, I mean, I recognize that it's not a nominal amount, a 4.4% plus budget, but I think it's very much needed to maintain the educational system that people have come to expect in Berlin. And, you know, we put our best foot forward and really tried to preserve staff and programs, as you can see by the stacked bar graph. So, thank you.
Thanks. And you actually just reminded me of one other point that I would like to clarify. Sal from the Board of Finance did ask a question about, you know, our budget not adding in COVID-related items. And I do want to clarify that, no, it didn't. Though I referenced them, it was more of a point of reference of what has happened, where we're going, the uncharted territory we're in. So with the total request for new staff and the 7.8 funded, I know where I was talking about the interventionists, and I said we're going to need interventionists more so than ever before. That's not why they're put in, just to clarify and have it on the record. We need them regardless. The need is there. It's essential. But, you know, due to this situation, you know, it's almost more so than ever before, so they're not in there because of COVID. And then also with the substitute teachers, we don't need more substitutes because of COVID. Like I said in the presentation, the substitutes were an issue before. It's a discussion we've had as a Board of Education previously prior to COVID. But because of COVID, it's become an increasingly larger issue where then we cannot get any substitutes. So if we have just the permanent building subs, then we don't even have to worry about this. And, you know, it would really be unfortunate if we had to outsource that service, because then that's an additional service we have to pay for. So thank you for your question in the previous meeting, Sally. I appreciate that. So I have the opportunity to clarify. All right. So any other discussion before we move to the vote? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, 8-0. So now we are going to move on to a discussion about the school calendar. So I had a conversation with Superintendent Benigni and some other board members, just expressing concerns. I heard from one board member asking if we could add this. So we discussed this year's snow days and our current plan for this year, 3 snow days, and then we move into remote learning full-length days. So I agreed to entertain a discussion amongst the board. So I'm going to actually just kick it off to Adam, and you can start us out with this discussion.
I appreciate that. I did ask for this item to be added to the agenda for a number of reasons, as we've already had our 3 snow days, which personally I was not really in favor of, but we're beyond that at this point. Two points I want to make. Number one, I want to talk about what the end of this current calendar year is going to look like, and then also just to have a discussion about what school days can look like in the future. As I said, for myself personally, I would have preferred to see the kids learning remotely during those snow days and getting out earlier in June. That being said, I know there was discussion about letting the kids be kids and letting them play in the snow. They might be fine for the elementary school kids, but I could tell you for the middle school and the high school kids, I think they'd appreciate June a little more. That being said, I'm hoping that with all the technology that we've invested in, either prior to COVID and also now during COVID, in understanding what it's like for remote learning, I would almost like to see for future years, rather than having snow days, at the very least have a half day remote, and so the day still counts. And rather than pushing until June. Right now, our kids, and again, I speak personally just from having one middle schooler and two high school kids, they've been home enough. And they have been home since March, and they cherish the days being in school right now. And the thought of having another snow day and then having three, I was surprised that they have three already, but I'd like to see us move towards getting them out of school in June, hopefully at a time when vaccines are pretty prevalent, and we know hopefully our teachers will have them by then, hopefully most of our family members will have them by then. But so, bottom line, I'd like to look at what the calendar is going to look like for the end of this calendar year, and then moving forward, possibly looking at half-day remote for snow instead of having full-day snow days.
Thank you, Adam. So I guess as we look at the calendar for this year, yes,
I'm sorry, if I could just ask Adam for clarification?
yep.
What's the preference for a half-day versus a full-day virtual and a snow day?
The preference is, for those that enjoy having a snow day, a true snow day, and I still remember my children being, well, even when I was young, and having a snow day and playing in the snow, or having those kids that maybe are elementary level. I do understand that there is the nice, child experience of being able to play outside with your friends, and I can understand that. And my only point was, I know that the board voted on having the 3 snow days this year. I thought it should have been 1 or 2 maybe. But I think going forward, if there's going to be a compromise, that might be a compromise. And I'm not against having full day remote either. I'm just not a fan of having full snow days, given the technology that we have, and adding it onto a date later in June. So that was just my thought.
And Brian, when we have a half-day, that counts as a full day, correct?
That would count for a day of school, a shortened day.
A short day, yeah. Any day counts as a full day. And teachers would have to work a full day, though, correct?
Yes, it would not be a shortened day for the teachers. They would still work on a day based on their contract.
So I know that this year, the state came out and said that they can have 177 days. This calendar, it looks like there's 179 days. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have 2 days that, should the board elect to, they can shorten the school year from 179 to 177.
So then the last day of school would be Monday, the 21st.
That's correct, given that there's not a need, for another snow day or a day where school is canceled. I'm just thinking beyond snow, if we had wind or power outages or things of that nature as we had in the past.
And there could be a storm in the spring or something that could also do that,
That's
right?
what I'm referring to.
Now, originally, we were going to be out of school June 10th or 11th? No, originally, 11th. And then we started a week later, so that bumped it out to the 18th. And now with the 3 snow days, now we're at the 23rd. So, I mean, all I'm saying is, granted, the 1 week was, out of everyone's control, but just to think that we started at the 11th and now we're at the 23rd is a big difference. And again, I'm not looking for, I just want it for discussion. I mean, for planning purposes, I know that we have no action on the agenda this evening for it, I don't believe. But, I think that we need to think about what the end of the school year looks like. And I know that we have missed a lot of schools, so I'm not really suggesting that we take the days off unless there's a consensus to do so. But moving forward, I would just be curious, and hopefully Brian can speak with the administrators, the principals of each of the schools as well. But I would like to see, with this day and age of technology, that we'd be utilizing it to our fullest so we can maybe have a little more predictability for the end of the year. I'm sure that teachers and parents and everyone else would appreciate being able to schedule a vacation without wondering, am I going to be in school or are we not going to be in school? I just think that from a predictability standpoint, it would be better for everybody.
So I think we have 2 different discussions that are on the table right now. One is next year's calendar and what those snow days are going to look like. And the second discussion is, with the 179 days, where are we with the 177 that the state has then approved? So where would you like us to start, with next year or this year?
Why don't we start by taking care of this year's calendar?
Let's do that,
And let's
okay.
let's put a date on the last day of school with the
Excellent.
spring.
And then at our next meeting is when we would vote on it and finalize it, correct? Or do we give you permission to do that and it's not a vote?
I think we would have to vote this
I think you should vote on it, because
Okay.
usually the board sets the calendar.
Do you want to start us out with the
Sure.
discussion?
So the discussion is that, based on the change in statute for this one year, we typically, we don't usually do the minimum number of days of 180. But this year, the entire state has been able to reduce the number of days from 180 by 3 days to go to 177. We were at 179. So, you know, I guess the first thing we'll be talking about is, should we go back, pull back, and have the last day of school be Monday, the 21st?
I would say it's premature to even have that conversation. I mean, looking at the 10-day forecast, I see snowflakes on 4 of the 10 days, so.
So we're not having snow days anymore.
But we don't know if those days produce a heavy power outage, we're not going to have a remote day. If kids can't get online or teachers can't get online to teach, we can't have a day. So it's too early to make a call on whether we should do 179 or 177 because we don't know what the storms are going to be.
Typically, in years past, we've reduced the number of days. We changed from the 183 to 181 when we did the half-day Wednesdays. The reason we're at 179 is 2 of the days we used for PD at the beginning of the year. And so typically we're at 181 student days. That being the case, we usually wait until after, April to set that last date because we don't expect any more snow.
And again, I don't have a problem waiting. I just wanted to discuss it, having talked to a few other parents as well. And then the question came up, if we have all this technology, why are the kids not learning remotely? I want to at least have a discussion. And I don't have a problem waiting till April, for that matter, to figure out what the last day of school is going to be, as long as we know that it's something that's up for discussion, that we have the ability, if we choose to go from the 23rd to the 21st, assuming we don't lose power.
So are we willing to let's wait on that until a later date?
I think setting the end of the year calendar just makes the most sense to probably wait till our first meeting in April, the 1 April meeting, because at that point, we've most likely encountered any of the bad weather, unless anyone on the board thinks that we should address it during the March meeting. I don't know. I know that there's parents on the board and people who like to set their vacation, so if someone has a different idea, I'm interested in hearing it, but I think it.
Sorry, Madam President. I'd like the superintendent, if you would, to go back and do some research and some discussions with the staff and to make sure that we're not going to compromise any educational quality issues with certain students or overall to the students with the remote learning. And it's going to be difficult, if you're looking at a forecast and 2% of Berlin's out of power versus, it's difficult. So I'd like to have a discussion and work with your team, superintendent, to find out those logistical issues, the quality of providing the education, the difficulties that would be presented, so that the board can consider them. I know that like Adam had expressed, planning for vacations and so forth, and I'm all for vacation about now. But I want to make sure that we focus on the quality of students and obviously the time, effort, and energies of the staff to make sure that we don't complicate their jobs.
So I will jump in right here. I want you to know that, as someone who's been in education for the past 14 years, first off, the state has changed the requirement from 179 this year to 177. I will say that we will have a lot of frustrated families and teachers if we are going above it and none of the other surrounding districts are. I know my district and most of the districts around have cut it back. I also know if we are going till June 23rd, which is a lot later in the year than most the years we've gone in my 14 years, nothing is happening the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. As much as we would like to say, as much as we would like to sit here, as much as the administrators would love to say, learning is happening up to the very last second, realistically, it's a very difficult time to engage learners. And then also, families will just choose to keep their kids home and not even worry about it. And I think, and Brian, feel free to say, you can do the research and you can come back with more information, absolutely. But I think that now that we've had this conversation about 177, the public is made aware, we have all discussed it, and then we potentially say, no, we're gonna keep you in 179. People are gonna think it's very unfair, and I just, I think that, Brian, what would you like to say on this?
I think that the message has always been that we've done more than the minimum number of days that the state has recommended. 180 was the minimum. We've always done more. It used to be 183. But that being said, the last 3 or 4 years, the board in April has always looked at the calendar and tried to make the school year end, I guess, with the minimum number of days or ending on a Friday so that it wasn't a part of a week. They've always looked to do that, but typically have held and waited to do that. The other part I think to think about is we don't know how many remote days we're going to have, full remote days moving forward. So, with the way the snow's going, we could have many remote days. So it might be a little premature to set that date. And, we had the 177 option at the beginning of the year, and we still held it at 179. So, we could have done that then. So, I don't think there's any harm in waiting, until April 1st. We're talking about, 40 days or so before we would set the date and lock it in 40 or 50 days.
Yeah, typically every year we do finalize that date in April, but, also thinking about the end of the year, we want to think about quality, not quantity. If we have the option, and make sure that, if Monday's the last day, and students are going right up until that Friday, working and learning and being assessed, and then Monday's like their final wrap-up day, then, students might be getting a better education due to that, but I don't know. So we will, I guess, table this part of the discussion and come back to it in April. Brian, if you would like to speak with the cabinet, bring back any information and their thoughts, that would be very valuable, and I would be interested to hear, where you all stand on the 177, 179. But also, just to be clear, students who do receive accommodations in special ed and qualify for summer school, they are offered that opportunity as well. So it's not just school ends and the summer begins and learning stops. So we do have programs in place for our students who do need it. All right, so now the next discussion that we can have, and I think we're not taking any action tonight, is do we think next year should be all remote?
Before you begin that discussion, the State Board of Education is only approved for 1 year. So we're premature as far as looking ahead for the following year.
Let me go back then because we've already had our 3 snow days, and this is more a question for the elementary principals. I think it's a little easier for middle school and high school to be remote on a moment's notice. I'm curious, because we've already hit our 3 snow days, what does it mean for the elementary students and teachers and principals if all of a sudden the 2 inches of snow turns into a foot? How do you plan for that, to go remote?
I think the biggest thing is that we have to get the devices home with the students. So we've asked the students to take the devices home today because
every day this week.
Right, this week. So that they have to be prepared to do that. And we're not going to, developmentally, to ask an elementary student, especially in the primary grades, to be on the computer as we would expect of a middle school or high school student for the entire day is unreasonable. So the days that we're having remote learning for an elementary student, it's typically front-loaded in the morning before. In the afternoon, there is a time the teachers are still working, maybe working with subgroups of students and so on, but the schedule is different. to just to ask a student to be on that much is unreasonable. And we talked about that, and that's one reason why we don't have the Zoom system at the elementary grade level, that we don't have the synchronous learning system that we have at the secondary.
Thank you. And again, that's why it was only discussion. I know that no action this evening, just to maybe think about it. And obviously, Department of Ed, I think they're going to move in a different direction. I could be wrong, but I think that they're going to be looking at the investments that were made at the state and accommodate towns and allow them to make that decision going forward. But, I think it's at least a healthy discussion to have.
I just want to add something if I can, and that is, I do think it's a fair point that from a developmental perspective, elementary school students are probably less inclined or less capable of sitting in front of their computers for 5.5, 6 hours straight. But if we consider, the perspective of diverse learners, right? And even we had student representatives when we asked at the beginning of this whole endeavor reflect that it was difficult even for them to spend lengthy periods of time in front of a computer. I know, sort of anecdotally, we can all probably speak to the challenges presented in all of our homes, and even for ourselves, sitting in front of computers for lengthy periods of time. But for teachers to be on all day and for students of all ages to be on all day is particularly challenging, for some more than others. But it's something I think worth entertaining. The suggestion that was offered with respect to an abbreviated day, when in fact they are remote learning days, I think is one that would potentially benefit all parties involved. So I think that's worth exploring further.
Does anyone else have anything they would like to share? So I do want to say that the district I work for our virtual learning snow days, the first 2 hours, we have a 2-hour delay, and then we teach and have the regular day. So even as a teacher, though it's a full contracted day for myself, if I have to clear snow, which I don't do, but if I had to, I would be able to, and then that frees people up in the morning so they can have that delay to kind of get stuff ready, and even if students have to go out and shovel, and then, so if that could be something maybe that we could consider down the road, I'm not sure, but I think the discussion should be tabled for now. And when do you think, Adam, I'm not sure if you have the info, or Brian, you do, but the State Board of Education has to approve this for next year. So when do you think, if you were to guess a timeline, that might be approved? March, April, May, June?
I'm not sure when the timeline would be, because I don't think the sense of urgency is that they had this year is present at the moment. But so I think it could come late in the year or even in summer. I'm not sure. I know that the superintendent group will be putting some pressure towards them to make a decision on it, because it's been discussed multiple times within the Hartford area superintendents.
So I think, Adam, when we get more info about next year and the direction we can go in, we'll put it on the agenda.
Yep, perfect.
All right, so thank you everyone for your discussion. Moving to item E of our agenda, the discussion of athletics, spectators at winter sporting events. I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Benigni because he has far more information on it. I'm fully aware of what's going on, but he's been in contact with our legal counsel around this matter, so.
Thank you, Julia. First, the RAD, Dave Francalangio, is in the gym with the basketball team, the boys basketball team, having their first competition tonight. So Dave and I have been in conversation about winter sports coming back and what the plan was for Berlin Public Schools. And that plan was to have 2 parents or each athlete to have 2 tickets. But I think it's important to know why do we decided this and the guidelines that were in front of us. So when prior to the stoppage of sports by the governor back in, I believe it was November, 13th, I think, around that time. But back when the stoppage of sports, at that time, the governors charged the Department of Health and let me get my notes here, and the economic, what's that? ECD. They authorized them to have the power to put laws into place. And the guidelines that they put forth were that you can only have one adult, one parent per athlete in the gym. Our take was that we would have two parents only for the home games for our athletes, or 2 tickets per athlete. So if it was a grandfather and a grandmother, or a guardian and a sister or brother, that we would have 2 and have no spectators for the visitors. We started to enact that. Mr. Franklangelo was having his parents' meeting, and I wanted to get a hold of our attorneys to make sure we were within the scope of the law. And when I did reach out to our attorneys, I did talk to Attorney Antonici, Dori Antonici. She also wrote the brief for Connecticut Associations of Schools with another attorney, and the law states specifically that it's 1 parent per athlete, not 2 for 1 athlete. So the conversation went that we would be in breach of the law, and that we were not able, that the recommendation was not to have that, not to have the 2 tickets for our athletes for every sporting event. I did contact other school districts and found out there are several school districts that are allowing 2 parents or 2 tickets from a family to attend the sporting events. The question I also asked, so what happens if we do decide to violate what is the law based on what Governor Lamont and I'm not sure exactly which one of his, I don't know what you call it, executive orders, one of the executive orders did that. It was a bunch of them listed. But because of that, we would be in violation. So I guess the discussion here tonight for the board is, anytime there's something that's going against what the legal advice is of our attorneys, I think it needs to come here for a decision with the board, not a decision just with the superintendent. On a personal note, I think that we can adequately have 2 family members in a gym that holds a couple thousand. We're talking about 40 people in the gym. Being socially distanced, wearing masks, and, being that those people would come from the same family. But I would not make that decision without all of you hearing it here and telling me that's the direction you want to go. I did take the liberty to ask what happens if we violate this executive order. And we could be fined up to $10,000, but was told that that was not likely. And the standard of care, we would be, if someone did get sick, the liability would be back on the board. So to me, the question is, my own beliefs are superseded by what the law is stating here. But our intent, and that's about our intent, Dave and myself, our intent was to allow 2 spectators per athlete per event in the gym. So.
Thank you so much, Brian, for explaining all of that. I really appreciate it. I think anytime something comes across our table, we always, go back to our legal counsel, and we always try and take, the advice of the legal counsel, because they are the experts, and that's what we pay them to do. I also think about the student athletes and how they fought so hard to have seasons, and I would hate to see that impacted negatively and then their season potentially taken away. However, if the students are all, and then this is where my personal view comes in, if they're all practicing and playing together and then families are social distance, those students are already going to be together, and if their parents getting give it to their kid, and so it is essentially the people they are living with, their parents, and so that's where the tricky area comes into play is, if one student is going to be impacted, most likely their families outside are. So, and then that's where my personal belief is. So I'm going to throw it out to the board, and I will see what the thoughts are, because have to vote on this tonight, or no? It's just direction to,
You just got to give me direction.
Direction.
And I think, just to be clear here, Executive Orders 9K, 9L, 9M, and 9N, and revisions to the sector rules issued by the Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, the DECD, and updated guidance for operations on interscholastic youth and amateur sporting activities during a COVID pandemic. So that's what the governor gave the authority to the DECD as well as the Department of Health to make these rulings. And just to note, the CIAC, which is the governing body of all athletics in Connecticut, high school athletics, is their recommendation is no spectators.
go ahead, Adam, thank
I
you.
hate to be the only one who speaks, I hope I would take it a step further. I'd have no issue letting everyone in the household attend. So if it's siblings and parents, I'm at the point now, just personally, the kids have been through so much. And to stand in your house and debate with your wife or your husband and say, who gets to watch them play? I mean, come on. These are two parents, they're all living in the same house. I think it's ridiculous. My personal feeling would be whole household, parents and siblings.
I just have a point of clarification for the superintendent. Understanding that we'd be in violation of the standard of care, which means any lawsuit, we would have literally no chance of defending it. What's the financial impact to the board as far as the legal fees, the damages? Do we have insurance for it? What are we looking at? Obviously, our budget is tight, and we don't have a contingency for these types of suits, and we know that they do happen. Anybody attending and getting COVID within 3 days afterwards, and yeah, Berlin may be secular and close cohesiveness, but visiting teams, that'd be problematic.
If someone could prove that they became sick because of attending the sporting event, then the liability, and if they ever died, the liability could be huge, as well as the medical and so on. I guess, I don't even know if a release, I didn't ask that question, I guess I could. Is there some type of release that the parents would sign? I mean, they're not coming in contact with the athletes. They're sitting on opposite sides. So the way that it typically works is they sit on opposite sides. So, they could be totally on the other side and not use the lower 5 bleachers. So they're not, they're more than 6 feet. It's just, it's a question of, I don't disagree with Adam. I have my own personal beliefs. I have kids who are participating in sports right now that I can't see either. But, when you're going against the advice of an attorney, and the attorney did say, we definitely are going to tell you the most conservative we can to protect you. It's our job to do that. And she was great. She said, I actually side with you on a personal note, but this is what we've had to do. So
I'm going to turn it over to Tracy right now if she has something to share.
I thought you were going to share it.
Oh, no, you are.
Oh, I am.
I'm not talking about it.
Okay.
I'm teasing. No,
I don't know. I mean, you could look at it in a couple different ways, and legally, yes, and, our executive orders. And then I see Adam's point of view, and if you're already cohorted together in a family, I don't know about whole family going. I mean, like, maybe we could limit it to just parents.
Just 2 people.
Maybe there could be some limitation, like no neighbor, but just parents and living in the same cohort. I know that when it kind of hit, when football was the issue with the high school, that it never came back to us. And they just were out for a couple weeks, and then they ended up canceling the whole season and everything with the state. But I think most parents, especially if they're letting their kids play sports and assume that risk, I'm not sure that they're really going to throw it back at us if someone did get COVID, because I think parents right now, on the most part, are so wanting to experience that with their children. And like Adam said, I was actually thinking of my household, and I don't know who would win that debate, like who's going tonight, because I would probably say, well, I am, and then he would say, well, no, I am. So we'd probably be trying to scout tickets at the outside of the high school gym. But I mean, I do see the legal aspect, but I do think we're kind of got some forgiving parents in this town right now.
So to your point, Tracy, for the new board members, because they were not on the board during the football, we went in circles around the football and whether it was, are we going to allow it? It's going against, whatever the executive order was, so technically against the law and the recommendation, going against the recommendation of our legal counsel, and it was lengthy. It was a very lengthy process. We finally just said, okay, let's allow it to happen. Then when there was the outbreak, I didn't hear anything about football again. But we did provide them the opportunity, and I think that was the most important thing with that situation. I'm not sure if anyone wants to view it through that lens, but, I just know that was another big situation that we had to, work through due to COVID in athletics. Anyone else like to share who we haven't heard from yet?
Brian, I do have a question. Based on what the CIAC come out with their recommendation following the governor's recommendation, who holds the responsibility for the co-op sports? I know we have a few students that play on the hockey team. I think we have a co-op, I believe, with Newington, and a few other schools are involved. So what happens if that's violated? Who holds responsibility at these rinks for allowing people into these games?
The rink, the facility, because what they did, when they came out with the new sector laws here, when they allowed the CEH and the Department of Health to come out with the new laws, high school sports and college sports were not involved in it. When they came out with the new ones, they included high school sports to be part of it, but it was for all those private facilities that have rinks. They always had to abide by it, and they're supposed to abide by it now. So it stays consistent regardless of what level you're playing at. They're all the same rules about only one person entering.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, if you allow one parent to go, and let's say they do contract COVID from their interaction, they're going to go home and give it to their spouse. I mean, everyone's living in the same household. And to the earlier comment, it's, if you're allowing your students, your children to play a sport, you know that there are some risks involved. COVID or no COVID, there's always risks involved in sports. And you want to talk about a risk, it's trying to tell your wife that they can't go to a game. That's a risk you don't want to have to take. I really think that it's, given the size of our gym, I know not every school has a gym our size, but it is a large gym. And we do have two sides, and to spread out 40 people, I think is doable, and I think it's the right thing to do after what everyone's been through, to allow both parents. I would push for siblings, but I'll wait to hear from everybody else. But at the very least, the two parents.
Thank you. Brian, do you know what towns and how many towns?
Yeah, my understanding is there's 2 towns that I've heard of that are having 2 parents, but I don't think it's
Okay, you don't
appropriate. I don't
wanna
think
say
it's
that,
appropriate to
that's fine.
disclose the other
Do
towns.
they use the same legal counsel as us?
I would not know that. They wouldn't
Okay.
disclose that either.
That's fine, I was just curious.
So I would just offer that while I can empathize with wanting to be present for, and the challenge of making a decision of who should attend or can attend, I struggle with making a decision that's based on emotion when we're being advised by legal counsel and going against what are the governor's executive orders with regard to this. So that's where I feel our responsibility lies, is to make decisions that take the emotion out of it to some degree and keep our community as safe as we possibly can. I know that's probably not a popular opinion, but
I'd just like to just ask one more question of our superintendent who spoke with legal counsel. Aside from the school board's potential liability, did she, I believe it's she, discuss what personal liability there would be for board members who voted to go against the recommendations of the governor and so forth and so on? I'm a little bit hesitant if there's any sort of personal liability potential for a board member here when we violate, knowingly violate and recommend to violate that type of policy.
I did not ask about personal liability, but I did ask about any liability, so whether she was just neglected to answer that. But the only two areas she gave are the two I responded to earlier, which were the potential fine, which she said is not likely, and, the standard of care, if there was, it could be considered neglect. Those are the only two areas she focused on, Steve.
Just to clarify, Steve, we're not voting, we're just giving guidance. So since it's not a vote on record, I don't know if it could come back at one, like Tracy, Carey, and I, it's coming on us and everyone else is clear, like in the clear. So I don't think that's necessarily the issue, but, so I think right now, we really need to decide as a board through the discussion, without a vote, what direction and guidance we are going to give the superintendent to move forward with this matter. So let's move to that part of the discussion. If everyone just wants to kind of share their thoughts on where they are. We'll start with Stephen at the end. I haven't heard from you, so.
Just from my experience, my daughter's playing indoor soccer currently, full games in a facility substantially larger than the Berlin High School gymnasium, and they are only allowing one parent per to spectate, so they're clearly following the regulations that Brian is speaking of. And I do have agree with Carrie here that to knowingly violate something is not something I don't know if I'd want to advocate for. Let's put it that way. I also agree with Adam. I'm torn that I would also love to have my wife and I go together to watch the games, because currently we're splitting them. So I don't know, there might be some alternative to live streaming it possibly. I know that we've done some things like that in the past. That might be an option. But I think as far as what's right and what's the correct thing to do is, I think, follow the guidelines.
Thank you. Are the games getting live streamed right now? All of them or just some of them?
Yes.
All of them?
Oh, yes.
Our guy back there takes care of it all. Mark, what are your thoughts?
I tend to agree with Carrie and Steve here, is that there's guidelines that are set forth, and there's a lot of jeopardy, there's a lot of liability there if we do violate them. And as much as, my kids are grown, I went to all their sporting events and stuff, but in order to be safe and go by the guidelines, I think that's the way we should go.
Carrie, have your thoughts changed?
Not in the last few minutes. No.
Tracy, where do you stand with this matter?
I see both sides. I don't know if I want to be like the rebellious one and go, well, maybe two parents, but I totally agree. Legally, we're bound, and I think the town should know that if it does come out to one parent, that it's a tough decision. Emotionally, you brought up a good point. Absolutely. I would be voting on a motion, not voting, recommending on an emotion. So it's definitely not an easy one.
Tim, what are your thoughts?
The guidelines and recommendations that came out were after the fall season was complete. It was focused on the winter season.
Winter season only.
Okay. Thinking to the fall season, it was two parents or two tickets.
Four.
Not always. Certainly not for volleyball.
Oh, I'm sorry, indoor here.
Indoor was a smaller number. It started out with 4 and then fell to 3 and then ultimately fell to 2. We didn't, and Steve, I'm just looking to clarify, the events that you're going to are 2 teams and there's a parent for all the teams going, correct?
Yes. Correct.
So the difference here would be we're still not letting visiting team participation of parents like we did for volleyball.
No visitors.
So you could argue that Adam goes to watch his son or daughter, the point guard for Berlin, and Adam's wife or spouse or somebody else goes to watch the point guard for the opposing team. I know that's not what the state is saying, but
That was our initial position was, that we are allowing in no more than what the guidelines are, and we're saying exactly that, Tim.
Right.
That these two are coming to watch, even though they're watching the Berlin players.
Yeah.
Right, it's exactly how we looked at it. And, you know,
So, I mean, not that that's a loophole, right, Steve? Mr. Jenkins? That probably wouldn't hold up very strongly or well at all. So, you know, again, the flip side is that violation of standard of care, which would put us in a very disadvantageous position. So, I don't know that that helps.
Brian, for clarity, can you just go over one more time what the guidelines are? Because I think once Tim's point came out, people had some like aha moments, so just for clarity.
yeah, I can give you a few
Yeah.
headlines here. In all cases, indoor activities should be restricted to the extent possible with appropriate mitigation strategies, face covering 6 feet with distancing when possible, in the place of all indoor activities, those outdoor activities where close contact is expected. The CIAC, fans should not be allowed interscholastic contest or practice, that's a CIAC position.
When I coached park and rec basketball, I snowblowed the outdoor courts over winter break one time so that we could have a practice. Could we do that and have outdoor games?
Are you snow blowing?
I will
We
offer my
can't add
snowblower.
anything more to the budget, sorry.
And I know it's limited attendance is only necessary in a number of adults to hold a practice or competition, including no more than one parent or guardian per youth athlete, and no more than 50% capacity. So, I mean, the part that we're violating here, if we let two parents, is we're violating this one segment about one parent per youth
Well,
or athlete. But
read that again, because it
But it
doesn't
says
say who the
or.
parent is there for.
right, but that is what that's what our legal said, because that's the route we were going. That's the route Dave and I were going. Two parents for the Berlin athlete, no spectators for guests. It still meets the guideline that, you know, you're letting one per, the ratio still works, is what I'm saying.
But that language doesn't specify that that person has to somehow know the person that they're there for. I see the wheel spinning. Steve, where are you on this one?
You know, personally, you know, let's just do what we want to do, personally. But professionally,
Can you repeat yourself? I can't hear
I'm
you.
saying personally, I say let's just do what we want to do. Okay? I'm outside of my personal life, I'm a risk taker, let's go. But professionally, if legal counsel has given advice, if the governor's given advice, if the other agencies have given advice, and the students and parents are watching, I have a hard time trying to finagle around
I guess I wonder though.
legal advice.
Sorry, I wonder if people are thinking about it from, when that language says parent or guardian, are they immediately going to relation of? Right? I mean, that's assuming that we're letting the visiting team bring their parent or guardian.
And I thought that's what the superintendent was trying to clarify with council and didn't get the answer I think he was looking for.
It's not. And the reason why we ended up there is Dave and I had this planned from the beginning. Other schools in the CCC are not allowing, they're following the CIAC guidelines and not allowing spectators at all. So the message of having two, Dave wanted clarification because other districts weren't. And that was the reason for, you know, seeking the legal advice and clarifying to make sure. And, you know, I did think that we had a loophole that met the criteria still, not letting the spectators. I don't know any school district that's letting the opposing team spectators in for a game, even though they could based on the guidelines. But maybe some are. I have not heard from any superintendent that is. So, I mean.
Can I just go again? Obviously, I'm an advocate for two parents. You said that there's a boys' game going on right now, so that would mean if anything were to change, I think there's only 6 home games per, right?
12 games.
12 games total, 6 home games. Now for the boys, if anything changed, it'd be 5 home games where both parents can be in attendance. And I'm thinking about that senior who's playing and can't have both of his or her parents at 6 games, 6, to potentially finish out their career. And I think if we have the ability to instruct you to allow 2 parents, I think we should do that.
I think they know the risk too, and if I didn't know the other teams weren't gonna have parents or guardians or adults. And plus, if the parents are, like, it's of a divorce situation, that could also get kind of hostile if you're saying who, but I kind of am for the two parents, or guardians, or the two people.
So what I'm gathering is, what Brian read to us, it said one parent or 50%.
There's a lot of reading here.
Right, so
1,000 people.
this
No, that was
is,
enough. That we didn't pay, that was
You know,
CIAC paid for that.
I think without a vote, this is one of the tricky things that the board is faced with that has to give Brian direction on how to handle it. Because, it's either gonna, like, we make a decision on one way and then we can have, negative consequences. We make a decision another way, we'll also have negative consequences, one way or the other. I don't know if there's necessarily a perfect decision. I don't necessarily know what the perfect solution is. I'm an advocate for the kids as well, and I want them to, be able to have their parents there, but I also don't want their season to get canceled because all of a sudden so many people are coming in and, football season ended after there was that COVID outbreak, and, they fought so hard to have that season. It's really too bad that that's how it happened. I think, there may be that loophole within the guidelines, but we are not the enforcers of it. So I don't know if it makes sense to just follow the recommendations put forth from Shipman and Goodwin. And Brian, what are your thoughts? I don't know what the right direction from here is everyone is pretty divided.
Yeah, I mean, trying to, and I've read this thing 3 times, it's 14 pages. There's a short brief, which is like 5 pages, and the long brief. And, at first I thought that we'd be okay with the 1 and, 2 and 1 and 1. If I didn't call the attorney even after reading this, I would still think that we were okay. But, obviously, when you're taking on that kind of liability, I wanted to, that's why it's here with you. I don't feel comfortable making that decision without guidance from the board. It's similar to the football discussion we had before. My own belief, as I said, I think you're talking about a maximum of 20 players, of a scorekeeper, a few refs, both teams 40, and then you're talking about another 30 parents in a gymnasium that holds a couple thousand. So, I think it could be safe, but it does, it doesn't align with what we're being told is how they'd like us to do it. So, it just, I don't know what else to say to you on that.
I know. How much longer is left in the winter season?
Well, as Adam said, each team is supposed to have 12 games, 6 home, 6 away. So the boys played tonight, so they have 5 more games that they would have. So we're talking about 5 games.
The season only runs, I think, 4 weeks. If anyone knows, I think it's 4 weeks. Mid-March, yeah, so a little more. Yeah, 5 more.
State tournament this year.
Correct.
I know there might be a conference pod tournament. I don't know. Mrs. Eustace, I don't know if you know, is there a conference tournament at the end or not even? Yeah, I heard there might be like almost like a pod of teams that you played. Right, so there might be some additional competition at the end, but it's very limited to the same teams you played.
And again, we're not talking about opening it up to the general public. We're talking about opening it up to 2 parents.
Do you think we could receive some more information, and just hear me out, receive some more information within the next few days, call a special meeting via Zoom, so we have 24 hours posted, and then have an official vote, and then that will give you your guidance and direction? I don't know what your thoughts are. I know we want it resolved now. I understand that. But with everyone being at very different points, I don't feel confident in saying, go ahead, Brian, allow whoever, or no, follow this, because we are very divided with where we all stand right now.
Just so you know, too, when we do pick up the phone to contact an attorney and we're spending money, I did press the attorney a little today and said, why did you write the brief for the CIAC in the manner that you did? Because supports, even if not. And her message was that that's their client also. And regardless, they would write the brief the same way, whether we asked them to write it or not, that they were just following what the law is and putting it out in a manner that's comprehensible to all. So, it's, because it's difficult to call our attorneys, and our attorneys wrote the brief and try to get, a way to make this happen the way we'd like it to be. So, I'll gladly share with you the memorandum to look at. I can definitely set something up if that's what you'd like me to do, Julia.
So what do you think? I know you want our guidance and direction, but we are obviously not there right now.
Anytime I'm going against what our attorneys say and I'm representing the Berlin Public Schools, I'm not going to do that with any knowledge of doing it without consulting with all of you, because I'm putting all of us in a liable situation. That's my job, to inform you of a situation that could be potential harm to the town or to the district. And like I said, my own personal beliefs are very similar to some of the others. As we said, without this, do I think we could do it in a safe manner? Yes, I do. But we do have a document that's saying it's not appropriate to do it that way, and we have the counsel of our attorneys. So, we have to decide, just like we did with football. They were told not to loan the equipment, and we still decided to loan the equipment, with that waiver. So, I have no problem calling the attorney saying, what would you have to draft to allow us to do this? But I don't know if there's anything they can draft even, to limit the liability. I don't have an answer for you, Julia.
So Adam, I know when I said that about the vote, it seems like you disagreed, I don't want to assume, but can you just tell me what your thoughts are, where we are with this?
Yeah, what I would disagree with is looking for more opinions, because I don't think it's going to help. I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
I think that we're here to represent the public, the students and the parents. And if we feel that 2 parents should be allowed, then I think we do it. If we think that 1 parent should be allowed, I think we do it. But that's what we're elected for. Obviously, where I stand on it. I don't think that going out and asking other people is going to get you any different information than what we already have, though.
It wasn't asking other people, it was giving us the opportunity to review the material, calling a special meeting in 2 days, so we have the agenda posted for 24 hours, doing a Zoom meeting, and then a vote. So since everyone is very divided, some people are saying follow the law, some people are saying just do 2. Wherever people stand is okay. We are allowed to have different opinions. But if this isn't a vote and we're not making a motion and then voting on it, maybe that's the best direction to go in. And if it's, if we can't have a special meeting on Zoom tomorrow, we could potentially have it Wednesday or Thursday if we get the agenda posted. So it would be just us going after having the opportunity to review the material that Brian has been reading, and then people can make a more informed decision. And that's all that it would be. It wouldn't be like an audience of citizen or hearing from the community necessarily. It would be exactly what you said.
One thing I could do is, if it would make the board, before that meeting, is I can contact the schools that we're playing, just to see what their policy is. I can share the information with you, and then we can have the vote. Not that that's going to change the law, but it might be helpful if you saw that, if we all saw that 6 other schools are letting 2 parents go, then it's not to say it's right, but we know others are doing it also. Like I said, I know of 2. They're not schools that we play, but I'm aware of 2. And I did speak to one of the superintendents today.
Brian, would it make you feel more comfortable if we brought it to a vote and it was like an official agenda item on the record?
I think we need to do that just like we did with the football, because, we're going against something that's here that's not typical. And like I said, I'm not comfortable making that decision and going against that unless that's the board agrees on it.
Right, and I think this is a difficult one, and again, everyone can stand where they stand, have your own opinion, but, remove the emotion, review the materials, and then stand by your vote. And, it's not a matter of persuading one person to vote one way or the other and just coming up with a consensus to end the meeting, because I think that's where we would end up tonight. We'd say, okay, fine, let's just do it, Brian, go ahead. And then people would probably be regretting it after the fact. So I think just giving it its time so everyone can do whatever they need to do in the meantime. And it's not like something that has to happen even a week from now. We could just find.
I would just suggest if we're not going to make a decision this evening, that we do it quickly, because I think there's a girls' game tomorrow. Thursday.
I agree, and that's why I said Wednesday, because let's just get the agenda posted tomorrow, find a mutually agreed upon time that works for everyone, and then just move forward with it. That will give us all 48 hours to review the material. Hopefully, we can have a quorum, and then we'll have the vote. That's the only solution I can come up with this at that time, because I don't feel comfortable saying, Brian, I think there's a majority to move this way, act on that. I can't make that decision, and
Julie, just as a little bit of information here was brought up, you know, that they have a 12, boys basketball has a 12-game season. I just pulled it up on the CIAC website. If the teams are lucky enough to make the tournament, again, it would be expanded. The tournament goes from March 15th to March 28th. So there would be additional games for teams that do make the tournament. So there will be additional games beside what's on the schedule. Just a bit of information for everybody.
Well, I do understand that this needs to happen quick, because I know parents, this is important to them. I know athletes, this is important to them. And then there's people who don't care one way or the other. So I think it's doing right by our community to just figure this out, make the decision, stand by, and move on. Is there a time on Wednesday that everyone could meet on Zoom? Brian, what's your schedule on Wednesday?
Whatever you guys need.
Whatever we need. So that would be Thursday if we met at midnight.
Wednesday? You want to meet in the afternoon?
I can meet anytime.
Do they want to meet afternoon? Do you want to meet evening, morning, whatever works for all of you?
3:30 on works for me, so if,
I have a 3:45 staff meeting with the entire district on Zoom, anyone that wants to be on the meeting. So I could go 5 o'clock, I could go morning.
does 5 o'clock not work for anyone?
That wouldn't work for me. I'd be commuting at that point.
Okay, what time could you make it?
5:30 or so.
5:30?
Yeah, that's just.
What about, does 6 o'clock not work for anyone? Just because I know sometimes 5 o'clock can get a little nutty for people that time of day. So 6 o'clock works for everyone.
6 o'clock works for me.
So could we do
I'll set it up, yep.
6 o'clock on Wednesday, and then hopefully, I strongly recommend, though, as Brian sends out the information, please take time to read it, and then reach out with questions you have. I would say directly to you, Brian, right? Sure. So I just read it, go through it, make your decision, take some time with it, and then Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we will have a very quick Zoom meeting where we will open up the meeting, have a motion, a discussion, and then a vote.
I'll send you the memo right now.
Brian, does that give you enough time to prepare
We'll
your
have that tomorrow.
materials?
Yes, we'll have,
Okay,
yes, let's do it quickly. Yep.
okay.
While we're at a pause here, there looks like there's one question that came in regarding the budget. Is there a way that you're going to get an answer
Brian
back?
and I will probably touch base on it, then I will get the response out, and I'll make sure I CC everyone on that.
I mean, I could share now about it if you want, the one question about the different softwares that we use and so on.
No need.
Does it have to be on the agenda to share out the email, or no?
No, it came in, it
Okay.
was supposed to come in during the budget session, but just came in after, that's
Okay.
all. So I have it down and to respond to.
You can speak to it if you.
Oh, you want me to speak to it now?
Sure.
So the question that was raised, let me just go back and get that, excuse me a second. It was from Cornell Bradera. And I'd like to know what the process for contracting internet service platforms looks like. Internet platforms in this case refers to systems like PowerSchool, IEP Online, and other web-based applications, i.e. the systems that remove attendance by paper, refer to a few items. How are these systems chosen by the BOE? So oftentimes when we choose a system, we look at multiple systems and then which one best meets our needs. It's not always the least expensive system, but it's often the one that's most compatible. I can share with you that we were using MMS for a number of years as our student management system, to the point that we were the last district in the state, one of the last districts, one of the last two, I think, in the state to use MMS. And then we switched to PowerSchool. PowerSchool has probably over 80% of the districts in the state of Connecticut that they use for student management, maybe even more. So our choice really was limited to what has support services, what integrates best with, you know, the laws and things of you know, usability within our system. So that's how PowerSchool came about. Our other systems, like currently we're looking for a data system. We've looked at multiple systems over the years. We often research those systems. We look at what other districts are using those systems. We meet with those districts and hear how the support services are, whether it's meeting their needs, and try to do our homework. If we find that a system, we used Bloomboard at one point for our evaluation system. It definitely wasn't meeting our needs. It was a state-funded system, and we then switched to Town Ed. Even though we're paying for that system, the other system was inadequate. It didn't allow us to do what we need to do. It was time-consuming. Information was lost. So we really look at our systems through a lens of what works for our needs, and then what's best for the students, the teachers, and time efficiency, because time is also money. If it's a system that's cumbersome, that we have to keep going back and forth to find information, we don't go with just because it's the cheapest system. So that's about how many services are no bid contracts. Oftentimes we look for multiple systems. There are no bids. It's not like we're asking for, there's, you know, 3 data systems, so, but they're all different, they're unique. So it's not that we're looking to select one or the other, we're looking for the one that meets our needs. There's not the bidding process for that. In the spirit of transparency, is there a place to be a website that lists all the software just used in the district? We don't, to my knowledge, we don't have those listed, but we definitely can make that list available. We do have them listed in our budget documents and things, the various systems that we use. Are these systems reviewed annually to discern prior years' performance effectiveness? Absolutely. We used to use Discovery Ed, and we look at the amount of users on that and the cost, and we decided not to use it any longer. But we do look at the systems on a yearly basis to see how often they're being used, by which school, who, and then what kind of cost are we doing it. The one thing you didn't ask, but I will say that when we have an opportunity to get multi-year contracts and drive the price down, we do try to do that with these systems, knowing that switching systems, there is a time consumption, there's the usability and training the users to use those systems. So we really look for a system that's going to have longevity, and not just be here because it's the cheapest, be here for a year and then be gone, or it doesn't have the resources behind it to adequately train the staff. And when you call in with an issue, there's services for us. So I hope that answers your questions. If you have further questions, if you use the same email you did, I'll receive it, or you can use my personal email, or feel free to give me a call, or just email me and ask me to give you a call, and I'll give you a call to discuss further. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. All right, well, this was a great meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. I know it was a much longer meeting, and we had a lot of purposeful discussion. We have one last item on the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion by Carrie, second by Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 8-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you for your time. Thanks for everyone who was here. Enjoying the